Ukraine has revealed the true casualty numbers of the Russian forces outside Pokrovsk. While Putin has bragged about his progress, just how much has it cost the Russian military? Plus, we're going to talk about Trump's efforts to make the peace deal happen, and Romania's TikTok candidate. Was he ever really the Russian agent the Romanian government says he is? Plus, we're going to talk about Elon Musk and his questionable constitutional actions trying to get rid of government employees and apparently shut down an entire agency. I'm Paul, U.S. Army combat veteran. Let's talk about it. Okay, so this is a statement from General Siersky, who says 15,000 Russian troops were neutralized in the Pokrovsk direction alone, right? And this is absolutely an eye-watering number, right? So this is in January. In 1 month, right, 15,000 Russians were neutralized, and about 7,000 of which were killed. So in Pokrovsk alone, you're talking about something on the magnitude of, about 233 Russian soldiers killed every single day in Pokrovsk. Now, I want to point out that the Russian military has, they've ostensibly made progress in and around Pokrovsk, but you can see that the word around is doing some serious work, right? And you can see as we back up through time that Russian forces have been advancing. They've given up taking the actual town of Pokrovsk and instead are focusing on this encirclement. But encirclement is a tough task because it cuts both ways, right? It also increases the vulnerability of the troops to the south. And would you really want to be the Russian troops here in Kotlina, right? Where there are Ukrainians to their north, to their west, and to their east and south. They're essentially surrounded on three sides. But the problem is, of course, would you want to be in Pokrovsk with Russians increasingly looking like they are also committed to an encirclement? But they are months away at this rate from taking Pokrovsk. And the real problem that Russia has is that it's not clear that they have 7,000 troops to lose. Because as Russian inflation rises, remember, those sign-on bonuses, because Putin's not going to mobilize his reserves and he's not going to institute a draft. So what he has instead is this contract army. And he is offering huge paydays to get those soldiers to sign up. But there's two problems. First is that Russian inflation is also rising, meaning that in order to keep those sign-on bonuses lucrative enough to get someone to sign up and throw away their lives, that he needs to keep them ahead of inflation. And the problem is the more money he pumps into the system by offering these huge bonuses, the more inflation rises, the greater the rate of increase of those bonuses, right? And you also have the more fundamental problem is that at some point, everyone who is willing to die for money will have already died. At the end of the day, right, there is no sum of money you could offer me to literally go on a one-way mission for the motherland, right? Why? Because I value being alive. I have young kids. I have a wife. I have a life. I like living. Living is good, right? And so there is no amount of money you could offer me to do that. At some point, Russia's going to run out of the people who are willing to say yes to that kind of assignment. And without those 233 people a day who are willing to go on these one-way missions, the whole Russian offensive operation will break down. Now, that doesn't mean that the Russian army is going to collapse, right? Because in this war, what we found is that the defense has an overwhelming favorite, right? Offense can happen, but only at a massive, massive cost. And for Ukraine, if they were to try to offensively retake their territory, it would also come at a tremendous, tremendous cost. And what I want to point out is that in the grand scheme of things, remember, early in this conflict, you saw Russian forces collapse in Kharkiv and in Kherson. And in the aggregate, while Russia has ostensibly made progress, it is only a fraction of the progress that early war made before sort of the battlefield became awash in drones and mines, really. So I point this out because, again, on the map, you see Russia winning in the sense that their forces are moving forward. But if every additional kilometer of territory taken results in a massive political cost, it's not actually progress. It's just losing in a different way. Sort of like in Vietnam, where the Americans never lost a battle, but they lost the war. And the fear is that that is happening with Putin as well. And Putin may actually be coming to that revelation more than we'll let on, because Trump obliquely is alluding to the fact that his conversations with Ukraine and Russia are going pretty well. He says, quote, "We have meetings and talks scheduled with various parties, including Ukraine and Russia. I think those discussions are going pretty well." Now, earlier in the day, Trump's special envoy for Ukraine and Russia, Keith Kellogg, is said that both nations would have to make concessions to end the war. And he said, quote, "President Zelensky has already indicated he will soften his position on land." This is something that he probably should not have said publicly, but this is what happens when you have a fucking 600-year-old guy responsible for this sensitive geopolitical situation. But this is true. This is something we've talked about earlier, that Zelensky has said, yeah, giving up land could happen. It would require a referendum from Ukrainians, but it is possible, right? And Kellogg said Vladimir Putin is going to have to soften his position as well, right? And of course, as we've talked about on this channel ad nauseum, Putin has not softened his position. He believes that when the counterparties opposite to him are softening their stance, he believes it's because they're winning, and that he says, well, listen, why would I stop when I'm winning? It's like a running back who breaks through the defenders and has a clear shot to the end zone, right? Putin believes he's that running back. He's got the ball. All the defenders have been juked. Why would he stop now? Why would he? Well, and so he's going to have to learn that this is a negotiation, and that he's going to have to understand that there's still painful defenders that can absolutely thwart his efforts in this war. But again, until someone like Trump gets their act together, you're unlikely to see it. Now, before we talk about old Elon Musk's questionable unconstitutional actions, I wanted to, and of course, the TikTok, the TikTok election in Romania that's really gone kind of sideways. I want to mention that you may notice that I'm pretty critical of just about everybody in this conflict, right? And the reason I can do that is because I'm fully independent. I'm funded by you, the viewers, right? And I try to make it worth your while. So Combat Vet News, this is my site. I host it. No one can take it away from me. And it contains an archive of hundreds, maybe hundreds of uncensored combat videos dating back to the start of the war. Right? We also, twice a week, every Tuesday and Thursday, take uncensored combat content that we either find online or is sent to me directly from the front lines. It's not available anywhere else. And we do a deep dive breakdown to get a sense of what's going on the front lines of the war. And so if you want to support me and get access to all those videos, any one of these tiers will do that. Lieutenant tier, colonel tier, obviously, if you want to support me more completely, that is going to be that would be a tremendous, tremendous help to me. Okay. So the link is, of course, in the description, right? And the new videos dropping tomorrow, so get with it. Okay, so this is crazy. This is from actually Dropsite. I think his name is Ryan Smith. He's a journalist who worked for many years for The Intercept, right? And this is about Romania's voided TikTok election. And what actually seems to have happened is absolutely fucking insane. Why? Because you might recall that their version of their Supreme Court had said that actually there's a problem. Our country's election is invalidated, not because someone hacked the voting machines, but because a foreign country, a foreign intelligence service, actually backed a social media campaign that supported an outsider candidate. And that because it is illegal in Romania for an outside entity to engage in this level of candidate support, they have said, the Supreme Court said the election is invalid, right? And they cited their own intelligence documents, right? A clutch of heavily redacted documents from Romania's Foreign Intelligence Service. Now, here's where things are kind of weird. Well, as more information comes out, the U.S. has been kind of cagey. They've just said, we're observing this, right? The actual thing is pretty cagey. And what makes it hard is that the Supreme Court said, listen, your elections are invalid, but it's because of these documents that prove that the Kremlin has totally hacked the election. Well, here's the problem. is that they've said those documents are classified, so you can only see heavily redacted versions. And so that left it up to Romania's press to dig through and figure out what they were talking about. But when they started to dig, they learned that things are a bit more complicated, right? So there is a far-right politician named, I don't even know if I could pronounce it, Georgescu. And Georgescu is a far-right ultra-nationalist who is an extreme Eurosceptic and repeats a lot of pro-Russian talking points. He probably is some level of Russian shill. Now, but on TikTok, in a very bizarre and abrupt campaign, a huge social media tidal wave that is pro-Georgescu just hit Romanian social media, including TikTok. And while some of them were expressly pro-Georgescu, some of them were not, right? They were meant to instead simply ask questions, right? They wouldn't use his name, but they would make hashtags, sort of like a Romanian version of being like, who can make America great, right? We all know who that's in reference to. Where they'd say things like, who is a leader strong enough to stand up to the challenges of the global elite? Well, you know which candidate that commenter is talking about. So it would be comments like that. But they realized that all of those comments were part of a network of TikTokers, Romanian TikTokers, who were all subject to the same agency called, I think called FameSpike. And so FameSpike, someone said, man, it's kind of weird that everyone here, Flame Up, right? It's weird that it's only these pro-Georgescu stuff is only coming from Flame Up. And so the journalist said, well, obviously the Russian government contracted with Flame Up to sponsor effectively these influencers who may not have even realized that they were being paid by Russia to do things like ask, who can make Romania great again? But this is where things get really weird. Because remember, the Romanian Supreme Court has said, we can't show you the documents, but we can verify that election interference happened by a foreign power, and therefore the election is canceled. And Georgescu, for the record, won. Well, here's where things get real fucking weird, is that when they found where the funding came from, it didn't come from the Russians, or at least not entirely. Majority of it was actually done by Georgescu's opposition, the left-wing party of Romania, their version of the Democratic Party, sort of. Why? Why would they do this? Well, the answer appears to be the same reason that the U.S. Democratic Party spent a bunch of money boosting ultra-MAGA Republicans in contested districts. In fact, they did almost the same playbook where they said, again, this is in 2022 and again in 2024, a Democrat-aligned political action committee spent $2.5 million to air an ad that about basically being like MAGA Republican, in this case Bernie Moreno, was too conservative for Ohio and said that he would do Donald Trump's bidding. Well, you may notice that if you're a conservative who supports Donald Trump, that's not an attack ad. That's a compliment, right? And so the Democratic Party spent tens of millions of dollars doing this on all sorts of candidates. And so it makes it hard to listen to the Democrats when they sit there and go, oh, MAGA's dangerously extreme. It's like they're not so dangerously extreme that you didn't fucking fund them, right? And so you see the same thing appears to have happened in Romania. But there's a problem, the same problem actually that the current U.S. government has. And that is that the extremists were actually popular. Apparently in social media, right? Especially if extreme people make extreme statements, and extreme statements drive engagement and attention on social media. If you're an extremist and you say some strident, crazy shit, you're going to get better engagement on short social media in today's era of short attention spans. So, what happens? Well, the Romanian left of center party got burned. Their extreme candidate that they were so sure, because remember, in elections with runoffs, what often happens is there's a bunch of candidates in an election, and then they have the first round, and then they go, okay, well, here's the top three. You gotta pick among the three. Why? Because otherwise you can get this thing where, like, let's say there's 15 center right candidates, and they're all only just a little bit different, but collectively they get 60% of the vote. And there's one super turbo leftist candidate. And that one super turbo leftist candidate might actually get the largest vote share. They might get 30% of the vote, even though 60% of people want, a generic conservative candidate. This is a generic example. This isn't any particular country's makeup. But the result of this runoff voting is they say, okay, listen, the two greatest vote getters are moderate conservative 1, moderate conservative 2, and far leftist. And usually what happens is the two very similar moderate conservatives, one of them will say, I understand, we should support guy number 1, and what I'm going to get out of this is a big vice presidency or important cabinet position, or just some of my policies implemented. And so then you end up with saying, okay, people, now you have to choose just between two, crazy leftist and moderate conservative, and the moderate conservative wins, even though in the first round of election, he might have gotten as little as 10% of the vote, depending on how many other candidates are here, right? So why then would you want to support extremists? Because your goal in a first past the post type of system, or in a runoff system, is to make sure that the person that your candidate's fighting is as weak and crazy as possible, because you want to force people to choose between a moderate candidate and a crazy person, right? So they actually will try to make sure that the moderates get their butt kicked, and that the most likely outcome is crazy person versus not crazy person. But it backfired on the Romanians, just like it kind of backfired on American Democrats. They put in a fucking crazy person, and the crazy person won, because that's how social media works, because every politician is a fucking idiot who doesn't understand how the modern attention economy works. And so the result is that now the Romanian Supreme Court says, the Russians did it. The Russians did it, guys. Now, again, a pro-Russian candidate may have just won, but he didn't appear to win because of his pro-Russianness. He didn't even appear to win because the Kremlin supported him. He appeared to win because the other side literally supported the dude and gave him money. So again, what does this mean for Romania? It's hard, because on one hand, you could have the Supreme Court annul because people voted for the wrong candidate, right? But that's not how democracy works. There is no wrong candidate in a democracy. That's the whole point of the democratic process. Or you could sit there and be like, yeah, we're going to let this guy win, and you've established a playbook to use social media to manipulate people. But again, if everybody's playing by the same set of equations, that's how democracies are supposed to work, right? And the problem is, let's say there is super top secret classified information that says that this guy actually was supported by a massive Kremlin operation. Well, then you have to release those documents, because this is the price of a democracy. Voters need to have access to the information they need to make decisions about a candidate. And so if you sit there and go, yeah, we can't show you why or how, but we pinky promise that this for top secret reasons, you can't vote for this guy. Dude, that's incompatible with democracy. Because again, you still don't have a valid democracy, especially if you take it to an extreme and you say, oh, well, candidate fucking jabroni, you can't vote for him. Our intelligence agencies say that actually he's an alien wearing a human skin, right? Well, but we can't prove it because it's too top secret. Well, that's not a fair way to run a democracy. So Romania has boxed itself into a really tough spot, right? But you know who else is in a tough spot, it seems? United States. Why? Because local trillionaire Elon Musk has taken it upon himself to halt payments to select U.S. contractors. Now, I can't tell you what contractors he has or hasn't paid, but he seems to be believing or is unable to discern the difference. He says, quote, the corruption and waste is being rooted out in real time, Musk posted on X, and that they are rapidly shutting down payments to a specific Lutheran charity. Now, Treasury Department doesn't have any answers to questions, right? Donald Trump has put the Tesla CEO and his huge donation in charge of what he says is modernizing federal information technology. So it's unclear how payments to charities, or as he also threatened to shut down USAID, which he called, quote, a criminal organization that should die. Ironically, of course, top security officials at USAID pointed out correctly that DOJ staffers, in order to access the Foreign Assistance Agency, needed a security clearance, and it appears that they don't have that. Now, again, I would like to point out that the current sitting president took classified documents out of the government with him and faced no consequences for it. So why on earth should the 22-year-old employees of Doge also do the same, right? Now, the problem is that, one, Trump seems to be down for this. And don't get me wrong. If you read the Afghan Inspector General's report, John Sopoko, you'll see that USAID and their total disconnect from the Department of State and their total disconnect from the DoD meant that in Afghanistan, USAID wasted a lot of money. In fact, a pretty insane amount of taxpayer money got wasted by these programs. But there's also, of course, the problem of the fact that it is hard. I understand and I'm sympathetic to the idea that the U.S. government takes out a huge loan every single year to pay its bills. And so why then we take out a loan that the U.S. taxpayer is going to have to pay back in order to give money to, again, humanitarian causes that might be very noble, that might be pretty stupid, that might be social engineering, right? But the point is that someone should have a unified strategy. The problem is that it's all stovepiped. Right? And this isn't just me saying this shit. You know what else says this? The Constitution of the United States. While the U.S. Constitution establishes an executive branch of government, it is left to normal statute law to establish inferior offices and agencies under the president under which the government can operate. Despite broad authority granted the Constitution by the president, the Constitution is clear. He does not have unilateral and unrestrained authority over the executive branch, and congressional action is required to create executive branch departments, fund them, and determine the nature and scope of their duties and confirm the appointment of top leaders. This is something that the Constitution made clear when they said only one person, only one entity in this country gets to decide how money is spent. And it's not even just Congress. It is the House of Representatives. And so if the House of Representatives say you are going to take 1 million taxpayer dollars and you are going to light it on fire to keep Africans warm, guess what? It is constitutionally required that they do that. And if Elon Musk wants to shut down USAID, he simply has to ask Congress to do it, right? But instead, he has appointed himself, insanely enough, apparently, a judge and president and Congress. Because you notice he didn't just say, remember, he speaks for the president. So the man in charge for the DOJ said USAID is a criminal organization. A criminal organization, guys. Point this out, that he's saying they committed a crime. Well, who gets to decide if someone's committed a crime? Why? The Department of Justice, of course. Or actually, they don't even get to. They get to charge you with a crime. It is a court that says that you're a criminal. And if you're a criminal organization, then bring fucking charges. Then put that information out there. Explain the crime that has been committed, Elon, right? Explain why you found something that a congressionally mandated agency has to go. Again, I'm not someone who's saying USAID should do everything they want, get all the money in the world. No, the U.S. government wastes a shitload of taxpayer money, and there's so many opportunities for savings. But there's a reason. There's a reason that Vivek Ramaswamy, who is a non-idiot, bailed on Doge on day one. Because he probably had to interact with Elon Musk for 45 seconds and immediately bailed, right? And the reason I'm so hype on this is because, again, there's a whole Wikipedia entry on when the president can reorganize departments. And Congress themselves it requires a literal act of Congress to enable the president to do this kind of consolidation and reorganization. As of this year, that authority was most recently granted to President Reagan, right? And it is granted for a limited period of time and is usually in response to a major crisis like the Second World War. Now, you may think, Paul, if you have so many gripes about Elon Musk, how come the best and brightest are working for him? Well, the answer is they're not, right? Wired found that 6 young men, all between the ages of 19 and 24, they say they have little to no government experience. No shit. At 24, you don't have any fucking experience. They're now playing critical roles at Doge, tasked by executive order with modernizing federal technology and software to maximize government efficiency and productivity. Which, how you end up, I guess, charging USAID with a crime is insane, right? They all have nebulous titles within Doge, and at least one is working as a volunteer. Again, I don't fault you for being 19 and wanting to work for Elon Musk in Doge, right? Again, I'll sit there. Here's one of them, by the way. Look at this. Look at this valiant patriot. Look at this respectable man, right? This dude is fucking 14, okay? Like, this is TikTok brain rot in the end state, right? You don't need context. TikTok tells you everything you need to know in 30 seconds. So you only need 30 seconds to learn if USAID should exist or not. You only need 30 seconds to determine if all government employees are trash or not, right? Like, this kind of thing is absolutely fucking stupid, right? And the reality is that, like always, this is just the sort of government brain rot that you end up with when you let someone like Elon Musk in charge of anything. And again, I will be so curious to find out if the courts let this stand, and will even the executive branch respect court orders? I don't know. I hope so. But again, Trump has shown he's firing all FBI employees who investigated him. And so what FBI employee is going to possibly try to tell Elon Musk that he can't do something? Who would even sit there and be like, you can't do this, it's illegal, right? That's the tough part. Anyway, one last story for you guys to talk about. And that is that President Trump, remember, loves money. And apparently, when the market found out that he was rolling out tariffs, you can see literally right here, January 20th, the inauguration of President Trump. And he announces some new policies, and people go, damn, this dude is going to make the country as prosperous as possible. Right? The S&P 500 sitting at 6,100 buckaroos. But then what happens? Why, then Donald Trump begins to tweet about tariffs. Tariffs? Those don't make any economic sense. On our major trading partners, Mexico and Canada, two countries where we do billions and billions of economically beneficial trade every year. Mexico, the country where major U.S. companies import a large portion of their raw materials. Those guys are going to get tariffed, and all of a sudden, the market fucking gets blasted. In fact, right now, it's trading at a mere 5,900 bucks. So you can see this massive decline in the market, and Trump listens to the S&P 500. He may not listen to things like the Constitution, right? But boy, does he listen to the market. And that's why they immediately cut a deal with Mexico. All right, Mexico will reinforce its northern border with 10,000 National Guard troops to prevent drugs and fentanyl from entering the United States. This is something Mexico probably wanted to do anyway. And of course, there's also an agreement that the U.S. will stop the flow of guns into Mexico, or improve their restriction of guns flowing into Mexico. This is actually a huge this is one of those things that Mexico has probably wanted for a long time. But this is, again, it's not clear to me that this was worth threatening a major trading partner for and tanking the markets, right? Because remember, risk gets priced into assets. So the next time a steel importer or a parts importer says, listen, our Mexican factories are charging a little more because we don't know what the future holds. Anyway, guys, that is all I had for you. It was a busy one. Hope you appreciated it. Hit that subscribe button. That makes a difference. Thank you to Bill Collier, Robin Colburn, guys, Martin, Gina Cresta, Chris Gorsuch, Francis Carios, AL90, Petra Taruru, all of our Lieutenant tier members. I could not do this without you guys. I appreciate you all so much, and I will see you in the next one. Cheers.